The call came in just after midnight. I was nursing my third cup of coffee at my desk, going through cold case files, when dispatch patched in the report. Homicide at the Langston estate. Possible high-profile case. No signs of forced entry. Surveillance footage compromised. The Langston estate. That meant one thing: Robert Langston. Billionaire investor, media mogul, and a man who had more enemies than friends. I grabbed my coat, feeling the weight of a long night settle over me, before I even stepped out the door. By the time I arrived, the mansion's glass walls shimmered under the floodlights. It stood on a cliffside, overlooking the city like a modern-day fortress, except the walls weren't made of stone. They were transparent, revealing the hollow shell of a life now snuffed out. Uniforms were already on scene, speaking in hushed tones. The coroner, a stout woman with tired eyes, was crouched over Langston's body in the grand living room. He was slumped in an expensive leather chair, a single bullet wound between the eyes. No struggle, no signs of a break-in. Just a clean, professional kill. I stepped inside, my boots making soft thuds against the polished marble floor. The house smelled of expensive cologne and stale champagne. A party had ended here not long ago. Glasses still lined the bar, a few half-eaten hors d'oeuvres abandoned on silver trays. Whoever did this had been patient, calculated. Detective Ruiz, my partner, was already by the surveillance panel, running a frustrated hand through her dark hair. "It's been wiped," she said, not looking up. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. No backups, no cloud storage. The system's been expertly scrambled. I glanced at Langston's lifeless body. Someone had walked into a house built like a fishbowl, pulled the trigger, and left without a trace. "Then we find out who had access," I said. "Someone tampered with the footage. That means they were close enough to get in without a struggle." Ruiz exhaled sharply, nodding. His inner circle. Employees. Guests at the party. Plenty of people to sift through. I took another sip of my now cold coffee, staring at Langston's vacant eyes. Billionaires like him built their fortresses to keep the world out. But sometimes the danger was already inside. And whoever had done this wasn't just good, they were careful. The kind of careful that meant this wasn't their first time. I had a killer to find. Ruiz started pulling up a list of employees and guests while I took another look around. The mansion's architecture left little to the imagination. Glass walls, open spaces, sleek minimalism. It was designed to impress, not to conceal. Yet someone had managed to slip in and out, leaving only a dead man in their wake. "Langston's phone?" I asked. "Locked. We'll need IT to crack it," Ruiz replied. But his assistant said he was on a call shortly before the shooting. Might have been someone he knew. That made sense. No forced entry meant he had let them in, or they were already here. I turned to the coroner. "Time of death." She adjusted her gloves. "Between 11 and 11:30. He bled out quickly. Whoever did this knew exactly where to aim. That narrowed our timeline. If Langston was alive at 11 and dead by 11:30, then the party guests were still lingering. The suspect had walked among them, maybe even toasted a drink before pulling the trigger. "Who was the last to leave?" I asked. Ruiz scrolled through her notes. "A woman named Evelyn Kessler. Business partner. Security logs show she left at 11:45. Close." I rubbed my jaw. "Too close. We need to talk to her." I walked back to the surveillance panel, staring at the empty screens. Someone had erased the evidence, but nothing was ever truly gone. Data could be recovered. And even if we didn't have the footage, someone had seen something. The party guests. The staff. The glass walls may have been wiped clean of fingerprints, but eyes had still been watching. I turned to Ruiz. "Let's start digging. Someone in this house knows more than they're saying." Evelyn Kessler sat across from me in the dimly lit interrogation room, her manicured fingers tapping a slow rhythm against the table. She looked composed, too composed for someone who had just lost a business partner. "You were the last to leave Langston's party," I said, watching for any flicker of emotion. "Security logs put your exit at 11:45. That's 15 minutes after he was shot." She tilted her head, offering a small, practiced smile. "I was saying goodbye. We had a lot to discuss." I leaned forward. "What exactly were you discussing?" Her smile faded. "The future of our company. Robert and I were about to announce a merger, but he was getting cold feet." Ruiz crossed her arms. Cold feet, or did he find something he didn't like? Evelyn exhaled slowly, choosing her next words carefully. Robert was cautious. Paranoid even. He had enemies, competitors, ex-wives, even people on his own payroll. "Like you." I pressed. She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. If I wanted him dead, do you really think I'd be the last person seen leaving? That's sloppy. She had a point. The real killer had been precise, calculated. I needed another angle. Our break came when the tech team recovered fragments of corrupted footage. The tampering had been thorough, but not perfect. A single frame remained, blurry, but enough to show a figure standing behind Langston's chair moments before the shot. The outline was distinct, familiar. One of his security detail. We moved fast, pulling files on every guard who had access that night. One name stood out, Jason Morrow, head of Langston's private security for the last 5 years. A man with military training, an airtight alibi, until we checked his financials. Large deposits, offshore accounts, payments leading back to an anonymous shell company, one tied to a rival media conglomerate. Langston hadn't been killed over personal grudges. It was corporate warfare. We arrested Morrow at his apartment. He didn't fight, didn't deny it. Just sat there, resigned. "You can prove it, can't you?" he finally said. I nodded. "Enough to put you away for life." "Who paid you?" He gave a slow smirk. "You already know." We did. But proving it in court would be another battle. As we walked him out, I glanced up at the city skyline. Billionaires built glass fortresses, thinking they were untouchable. But all it took was one crack in the foundation for everything to shatter. The case wasn't over. Morrow was just the trigger man. Someone had ordered the hit, and we needed to follow the money. The rival media conglomerate, Langston's fiercest competitor, had been bleeding for months. A failed acquisition, a downturn in stocks, desperate measures. Langston's merger would have buried them, and they knew it. Ruiz and I spent the next days dissecting every transaction, every offshore account. Morrow's payments led to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, owned by an entity tied to Westcorp Media, Langston's biggest rival. It wasn't proof yet, but it was close. Then the threat started. Anonymous emails, a black SUV tailing Ruiz home, an unmarked envelope on my desk with a single note, "Drop it." We'd rattled the right cages. One night, Ruiz's apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken, but her files had been rifled through. We doubled security, kept our investigation under wraps. Someone wanted this buried, but we weren't backing down. It took weeks, but we finally traced the payment back to Westcorp's CFO, Richard Vaughn, a man with everything to lose and no shortage of power. When we confronted him, he barely flinched. "You have no case," he said smoothly, sipping a $500 glass of whiskey. "No direct link. Just speculation." But then we played our ace. A disgruntled ex-employee of Morrow's, who had been left out of the payday, came forward. A deal was struck, a confession was recorded, and suddenly, Vaughn wasn't so untouchable anymore. By the time the case went public, the fallout was catastrophic. Vaughn was arrested, Westcorp stock tanked, and the board scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Morrow took a plea deal, spilling every detail in exchange for a reduced sentence. Langston's murder had been about power, control, and corporate greed. In the end, justice was served, but at a cost. Ruiz and I had made enemies, the kind that didn't forget. As I sat in my office, staring at the city skyline once more, I knew this wasn't the last time we'd cross paths with men like Vaughn. The rich played by different rules. But every now and then, someone like Langston reminded them that even glass fortresses could be broken.